Wrestling is weird. Always has and probably always will be. I mean, let's be real here, right? Let's just talk to each other for a second. Wrestling was at its most popular when an undead zombie wizard mortician was like one of the most popular figures in wrestling. So let's not sit here and say that wrestling is the most serious thing or the most like straight-laced thing in existence. It is very, very weird. But we're kind of going back to those roots, those weird roots, but not in the same way as the Attitude Era, right? We're not having these like crazy characters that are super, you know, popular. I mean, we do have those, but in the way in which wrestling is weird now is there's so much stuff going on that in the last decade, maybe even in the last 5 years, wouldn't have happened, wouldn't have been seen as humanly possible in the realm of wrestling, and now we're here. So when we look at the roadmap of professional wrestling in over the last year or so, right, you look at everything that's gone down, and it truly is a very, very weird space. It's like we're entering the twilight zone of professional wrestling. I mean, for starters, what, a year or so ago, TNA became TNA again, which a lot of people thought was never going to happen because they were trying to, like, wipe their hands clean of everything that happened at the end of the TNA run. But that became a thing. Then they got rid of Scott D'Amore, which is like the craziest thing. Then Scott D'Amore goes on to make Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling, and that's doing really, really well, and that seems to be kind of like soft partnered with AEW. AEW is still doing their thing. We'll get on to that, but first we're going to talk about TNA, right? We'll keep the tangents to a minimum here. You know, so Scott D'Amore makes Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling, and everyone thought, okay, you know, TNA, they might take a small hit, but it's not going to be the end of the world. They then get rid of Gail Kim backstage, which is also a crazy move. They then partner with WWE, well, mainly NXT, but the partnership is still a thing. And that is probably the biggest thing, probably of the last, like, year or so in terms of wrestling news. And we will get on to the bigger thing over Mania weekend, but this is kind of like the start of it. And that was that a lot of people thought that at first the Forbidden Door was like any sort of companies working together on a big stage, right? And that was New Japan and AEW coming together for the first time and sending talent over to each other. That was a really cool moment, and that was the start of the opening of the Forbidden Door, hence why Forbidden Door is an AEW New Japan term, right? But the Forbidden Door really did get opened last year when WWE not only made that TNA NXT partnership, but then made it official, and made it like official, with like signed contracts and everything. That was when the Forbidden Door really opened, because for so long, WWE have been at the top of the mountain with literally nothing coming close. And that's just an objective fact, right? Like, that is something that you look at and you go, right, monetarily and everything like that, and, you know, publicly and popularity wise, WWE has been the be-all end-all of professional wrestling, right? Anyone you ask on the street, if you talk about professional wrestling, they're probably going to mention WWE. And that is still how it is to this day. However, because they've been at the top for so long, and because there is like nobody else really, you then gotta look at it from the sense of, well, they have no reason to partner with anybody else, right? Like, when you look at it that way, it kind of makes sense that maybe there wouldn't be anybody to partner with anymore in professional wrestling, because, well, why would you partner with companies that do not offer you any benefit? And then the TNA partnership comes in, and that kind of blows everybody's minds, mine included, because I'm like, huh? As someone who's been watching TNA for the past, what, like 14 years of my life, honestly, I never thought that the day would come where TNA and WWE were working together, and I think that's like a crazy thing. And that is just the tip of the iceberg, because then you move on to WWE's next business move, which is the whole AAA. They said that they were partnered with AAA, and then at Mania, no, we've bought AAA, and AAA is now technically a WWE product, but it's still being ran by the people that run AAA. So that's a big thing. WWE are back to buying companies now, which I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but we will be able to look at that a little bit later on in life when the AAA WWE regime does its thing. I know a lot of people have their issues with with AAA at the moment and like some of the talent they're using, and I'll be real, I don't watch AAA, so you know, I'm not gonna hop on the bandwagon, but I know that they're using one guy whose name I'm not gonna mention, but you guys know exactly who it is, and yeah, that's a big thing. But then you look at like everything contractually within wrestling, and this is where things get crazy. So you've got the likes of like Tetsuya Naito leaving New Japan, a thing that a lot of people didn't think was ever going to happen. Like, that man was probably going to retire before he left New Japan, and I think a lot of people probably thought that, right? You know, Jeff Cobb leaving New Japan and then going to WWE, not the craziest move, but at the age Jeff Cobb is at, that seemed like a bit of a non-thing for the longest time as well. Then you've got like John Cena turning heel for the first time in God knows how long, and that's a big thing too, right? That's something that like a lot of people have spoken about wanting for years, right? It was something that was a focal point of the Firefly Funhouse match between him and The Fiend. It's like a driving factor of Cena for the last God knows how long, which is if he just turned heel, then people would like him again. And he's turned heel, he's gonna ruin wrestling, and the problem is that because he's ruined wrestling, right, he wants to ruin wrestling, they're going about it in such a weird way, in the sense of like, they're actually just going ahead and having the weirdest finishes to matches I've genuinely seen from anything from a main event, right? And you know, I'm not here to discuss booking, that's not really why I'm here, and I'll be real, I don't really care all that much as long as the wrestling in the ring is good, right? You know, that can salvage a lot of things. But then there's obviously the whole like WWE ID and like the WWE kind of indie drive where they're letting their wrestlers wrestle on independent promotions like GCW, NWA, that kind of thing, and like, that's cool, that is really cool. But let's not get to a point where WWE is starting to buy all these places, because they've done it with AAA. I reckon if I was to make a guess, TNA is next. If they're gonna buy anything, at TNA is next, and they're just gonna merge the roster with whoever they want. They're gonna go into WWE, and the rest are probably gonna either be still in TNA or gone. I'll be real, I think that's the case. Like, don't get me wrong, it's cool that WWE are actually starting to put some of their names out into the indies to help them get more reps when they're not on TV, because that's been a big problem with the modern WWE product. But the big thing is really just a case of, well, is it that good for the business if the end goal is always for people to tune into WWE? And here's the thing, it's not even tuning into WWE anymore, it's tuning into Monday Night Raw on Netflix. And I think that's probably the weirdest thing that has happened in wrestling in the past like 5 months, is that now it feels as though, in a really, really weird way, and it's not always the case, right? As someone who's kind of taken a bit more of a backseat from watching wrestling every week, I don't watch weekly shows live anymore. I really just tune into highlights just because I don't have the time, because the shows start at 1 o'clock in the morning for me, and well, I have a job that makes me get up at 2:45 in the morning, so it, you know, I can't do it, right? I physically can't do it and still do my job. So I just check out the highlights, and if the show is still on, I'll watch like the last 15 minutes or whatever before I end up going to work. I watch pay-per-views if I can, and that's kind of where I'm at the moment. And I think that with that, I have really noticed this weird shift in, especially with WWE, and that's kind of like where I'm talking, like really specifically WWE. Here are these 5-match pay-per-view cards, or 6 or 2 nights for WrestleMania. Here's the card, and some of the matches that should have been on pay-per-view are going to be on Raw on Netflix. And I think that we're starting to see this drive towards Netflix, right? I think the end goal is for Raw to do really well in America, because I reckon all of WWE are doing really well internationally on Netflix. The goal is for Raw to do really well on Netflix in America, and I get the weird feeling that they might, instead of going all in on Peacock, because I get the weird feeling that that was just like a testing of the waters, and now that Netflix are interested, I get the weird feeling. I don't know how long the Peacock deal is. Let me see if I can find that answer. 5-year agreement, and it's set to expire next year, apparently. Take that with a pinch of salt because I have no idea where that's coming from, but if that is the case, then next year, if business is still doing well on Netflix, there's a very high chance that WWE just moves strictly to Netflix. And at that point, we're going to see a bit more of a shift. I think right now it's literally just WWE trying to make sure that they hit those numbers in America and everywhere else as well. So they're loading up the Raw cards so that a lot of Americans tune into Netflix, and then they can get the deal, and then they can go on to make even more money than they already are. And I think once that happens, we're going to see this massive presentation shift in the whole of WWE. We're seeing it already, but it's getting crazier and crazier, and it's getting weirder and weirder. I guess because we're talking about weird things in wrestling, some of you aren't going to agree with this, some of you will. It's weird that AEW are dropping the ball, man. I try not to talk about my opinions on booking, because booking and what people like and don't like is very subjective. And I don't really like getting into it in the sense of like, well, I don't like this and here's why, because then people will go, well, how can you not like it? I do think that the Death Rider story has ran its course, and I think I spoke about this a while ago. I do think it's ran its course. I do think they're spinning their tires. Darby Allin has just climbed Mount Everest, which is also the weirdest headline I think I've ever heard. And quite frankly, do I want Darby Allin to be the guy to be the ultimate payoff for the Death Rider storyline right now? No. I think it has to be one of the Owen Hart winners. So it either has to be Hangman or Ospreay. I just need that belt off of Moxley. And I just need a bit of a fresh page, right? I think everyone can agree that AEW needs something right now that's going to freshen it up. And this is speaking as somebody who has tickets to Forbidden Door. I will be going to Forbidden Door in August. And the reason why I said I'm going to do it, one, it's in the UK, so why the hell not? And two, where it's a crossover show, I don't have to necessarily worry too much about the storylines going into a show like Forbidden Door, because it's not as heavily storyline. So I don't necessarily have to go, the booking isn't as good at the moment, so maybe it's not worth going to the show. I think it'll be a fantastic night of wrestling, to be honest. Am I hoping that Moxley isn't champion at Forbidden Door? Please. Which is really weird, because I'm actually quite a big John Moxley guy, I can't lie to you, but him as world champion, this run has just not been it, man. Like, the finishes are weird. It's like Wheeler Yuta is the world champion. It really is at times. The amount of times that man has actually technically won the match for Moxley, it is ridiculous. But I feel like I've rambled here. I just thought I would talk a little bit about my thoughts on the weird world of wrestling in 2025. Let me know your thoughts. Is any of this weird? Like, is this just me, old man yelling at clouds type deal? Is this just a guy who used to, like, watch every single show every single week, who's now kind of casualed out just a little bit? Is that just, like, a me thing? Are you guys feeling like wrestling's weird? Like, is anybody else seeing this, or is this just a me thing? Let me know. More wrestling think pieces will be here. YouTube really thinks you'll like this video, so if you've already checked out all the think pieces, then potentially consider checking that one out. And yeah, see ya.